When you started targeting founders of startups, there was an opportunity to become that first product that they needed for credit card or other financial needs. But as you move up market, start targeting large enterprises that has been around for a long time, they might have some solutions prior to you having that conversation. So for that type of product that it tends to be very sticky, even if it's not good, it's just so hard to change. How do you go about kind of penetrating that account and potentially expanding it?
I love that question so much.
You said product market fit is dead. Tell me more about it.
The market changes every day, every week, every month, and it's a constantly evolving, rapidly changing cycle. If you assume that I have a static market, you would assume I have a static product. And the market is changing, the buyers are changing, the buying criteria is changing, and imagine this is pre-AI. With AI, the market changes way before people understand what's going on. The notion that you found PMF and then you can keep scaling, that's just bullshit.
Hey, this is Carlos's AI voice clone. He's the CEO of Product School and the host of the Product Podcast. He asked me to do our next guest's intro before he takes over the interview. Karandeep Anand is the President and Chief Product Officer at Brex, one of the fastest growing fintech companies in the world. Founded in 2017, Brex quickly became the go-to financial services partner for most Silicon Valley startups. For instance, 80% of Y Combinator startups use Brex. This led them to raise over $1.2 billion in funding and achieve a valuation of $12.3 billion. Brex now serves companies ranging from startups to large enterprises, including over 150 public companies with a combined estimated market cap of over $2.9 trillion. At Brex, Karandeep has been instrumental in transforming Brex's product management culture and expanding its product into a financial platform, offering corporate cards, treasury solutions, and software for travel and expenses in one place. He also launched Brex Assistant, an AI-powered tool that simplifies expense management. Karandeep's career is equally impressive. He spent 6.5 years at Meta, leading a team of 3,000 people and serving 200 M-plus businesses globally, and worked at Microsoft for over 15 years, heading product management for Azure's application and developer platforms. In this episode, we cover evolving from a startup-focused company to serving enterprise customers, integrating AI into financial products in a highly regulated environment, restructuring product teams for efficiency and innovation, why PMs should spend more time on calls listening to customers, a third motion mixing PLG and SLG, assisted product-led growth, and the importance of continuous innovation and why product market fit is a journey, not a destination. I particularly enjoyed Karandeep's provocative take on product market fit being dead and his emphasis on constant innovation to stay ahead in a rapidly changing market. His unique perspective on using AI, not just in products, but also to reduce change management costs, offers a fresh approach to product development and customer acquisition. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Karandeep.
Thanks for having me here, Carlos.
So you were a bartender before the legal drinking age?
I hope I'm past the statutory limitation of when I can be charged for that. But in India, when I actually started working at a friend's bar when I was 21, and it's interesting that in India, the legal drinking age actually is 25, which is like the weirdest thing ever. So I was 20, not even 21, and a friend opened a new bar in Hyderabad, and it was like, I need a job in the evenings. So I used to go hang there and mix drinks and serve drinks, and people like, you are a little too young for this. And I'm like, as long as I don't get caught, it's all fine. So yes, I learned mixing drinks before I could taste them myself.
Now you're in the US. It was long time ago, so I think we're good.
So it should be okay.
So before you joined Brex around 3 years ago, you spent 6.5 years in Meta, and before that, 15 years at Microsoft. So I'm very curious to know what is the different definition of winning in product management at those different companies?
Indeed. I think, Carlos, and obviously I'm a huge fan of your podcast as well. I think you've probably already seen so many different perspectives on what product management is. I think it's probably one of the most bastardized version of definition of a job role is like product management can be anything and everything which the company needs, and there's no clear person to do that job. So engineers write code, designers love Figma interactions and Figma and pixels, and everything else kind of falls on the product management discipline, and it's a very broad discipline as a result. And I think no better example than this, as where Microsoft used to have program managers, is what they would call the product managers back in the day. They would do everything from write specs, PRDs as we know them today, and they would own making sure the product gets released to marketing and then to sales, and they would coordinate the entire life cycle of shipping the product. And hence the PMs of Microsoft are very different. They used to be a lot more coordination and very technical focus. And when I moved to Meta, half the PMs were not even technical. In fact, best of the PMs were not technical at all. Fiji, who now is the CEO of Instacart, she's a journalist, and she was the PM for video, and she was the PM for Facebook app, and then she became the GM. And we have so many examples of people who were very, very successful product visionaries who are absolutely no idea of like anything tech as a background, nor were they, mired in the details of how do you ship a product and take it to launch. Obviously, they were smart enough to figure it out, but the main thing was the definition of what a product does is very simple. Your job is to figure out how to win. In companies, enterprise SaaS like Azure and Microsoft, it was all about deep technical execution. In companies like Meta, the definition changed very quickly to figure out how to get to product market fit and scale very rapidly consumer product. And in some cases, it was all about growth. In some cases, it was about monetization. But a long way of answering a question, Carlos, which is all the PMs I mentor and people are like, oh, what should I go learn about being a PM? I'm like, are you passionate? Can you learn new things? And can you figure out how to win? If you can do that, you'll be a pretty good PM. So the definition of PM effectively is figure out what your company and culture needs and needs most help with. You are the de facto bridge between customers and what will get built. And your job is to go make sure everything that's coming in the way of winning, you're removing the roadblocks. If you start with those first principles, then whether you're focused on growth, monetization, BRD, PRD, all that gets sorted out pretty quickly.
Well, let's talk about Brex. Your official title says president and CPO. I think you are the first ever CPO I know that's also a president. So what's the difference?
I've building a previous example of my job is to win. And when I joined Brex after Meta, and my last team in Meta was like 3,000 people. So they're like, hey, you're going to go run this PM team of like 25 people. I'm like, I love that because you can go back into building the product. And hence, I joined as a CPO. But 2 years into building the product and rebooting, what we need to be as a Brex, because Brex started as a corporate card for startups. So we think of 2 or 5 founders in a garage using Brex cards to now 50,000 people, enterprise companies using Brex. You had to evolve the entire product. So a job was to redefine what product management means, what the product strategy, roadmap, vision should be. And that was what Brex needed 3 years ago to win. Last year, we realized that we built a pretty fantastic product, but the now next job is how do you scale go-to-market? So as a result, I end up expanding my job to not just own product. And typically, most of our people go and take on engineering. I went on and took on sales, marketing, customer success, because I figured that the next big S-curve for Brex will come by scaling go-to-market. And given how much of PM cycles get spent on customer and customer conversations, it was actually a very natural fit to go from CPO becoming a president and owning the customer lifecycle from selling to marketing and value proposition positioning and customer success than we normally take it for granted. Like most people think like, oh, CPO should become CPTOs. And I'm like, no. If you're an amazing PM and you talk to your customers, you can actually be a pretty good go-to-market leader as well.
So you mentioned Brex started as a corporate card for startups. I also live in San Francisco, and I remember being Brex everywhere, every single billboard, right? It was literally the Silicon Valley darling. And now it's an entire platform with many more products. So love for you to guide us through that journey as a product leader and how you were able to figure out kind of what to build next.
Great question. I think a lot of people think strategy is something that you sit in an ivory tower and you come up with like amazing, great ideas and like, boof, you build a product roadmap and strategy. That's one way to do it. It's a pretty bad way to do it, in my opinion. The right way to do is you have customers, you have one product, you have customers, go talk to them. Don't ask them what they need. Go talk to them, watch what they're doing, see where the pain points are, see what happens when they grow up, see what happens when they wind down the business, see what happens when they merge with another company. And automatically you start seeing a lot of patterns on what we today call as adjacencies. So most people are looking for adjacencies to their core business. Oh, Brex started as a corporate card. we didn't have to do a amazing strategy session to go figure out like the next value will come from banking. We watched 50 founders, and all these founders are like, we love the fact that we can go to Brex.com and sign up for a credit card in 5 minutes. Boom, I'm ready with a credit card. And they were still driving, spending the entire weekend to go to their local bank or Silicon Valley Bank and going opening a bank account. And you're like, oh my god, the next adjacency is not no rocket science. The next adjacency is, if a founder is trusting us with their one financial service need, which is credit card, what are the other adjacencies we can solve for and make their life easy? And the reason I want to double click on that example in this level of detail is, sometimes we think strategy has to be like, you need management consultants to do this TAM analysis and like do this SWOT analysis. No. Best strategies come by talking to customers and seeing where the market is headed. And it's far easier. And this is an example of when your target audience is the same. So in this example, it was founders. We did one job to be done, which is credit cards. We did the second job to be done, which is banking and bill pay and sending ACH and wires. And very easily became a portfolio of products, but for the same audience.
So I hosted the co-founder and CPO at Gusto on the podcast, and he shared something similar. When they started the company, they were targeting founders, and they focused on processing payroll, which is also a category that is not very sexy for a founder like myself. And he talked about how they were looking at how customers were hacking his own product as a way to influence what to build next. Versus, as you said, bringing a management consultant or overcomplicating a strategy, trying to figure out what someone wants, when in reality, you already have people telling you with their actions what they really want.
Precisely. Actually, I love that example, because the first example, Carlos, I talk about how Brex went from cards to banking to bill pay was us talking to customers and finding needs. But I'm going to take another example. At Meta, we did exactly what the Gusto guys did, which is we looked at how are people hacking our current products. And one great story we have is the way Marketplace was built, which is a very successful billion user plus product, was not because we were trying to build Marketplace. It started because we looked at how people were hacking the community groups that we had, like normal groups for families and friends engagement, and started doing selling and buying of items in the local communities. And we're like, wow, why would people do commerce on a social platform? And from that was born the idea of a buy-sell group, which is a special type of group. And we just constantly kept defrictionizing the experience. And then all of a sudden, we let's bring all of this traffic into its own marketplace tab. So to your point, there are multiple ways of getting to adjacency strategies, and they don't have to be complex as long as you're willing to talk to your customers, look at data, and look at how they're hacking your current product to find what are the next obvious jobs to be done that you can solve with what you already have working.
So as you think about the next big iteration for your product, especially within the AI era, I noticed that you launched AI Assistant, and you are also launching other AI-powered tools. But in general, like, how do you go about incorporating this technology within a highly regulated environment?
Indeed. I think this joke that the day finance people can trust AI to touch money is the day AI would have genuinely arrived and truly arrived in our lives. Because people are very comfortable with self-driving cars, but for some reason, they don't trust AI touching your money. But on a more serious note, obviously, traditional ML and traditional AI is what underpowers Brex for the last 7 years. What has changed, Carlos, pretty heavily is with Gen AI, there's a bunch of use cases which were just impossible to do in the past, but now they become possible. So the two frameworks that we use when thinking about AI and how do you apply Gen AI in product development now is in one of these two categories. Category number one is normal human tasks, which can be automated with the help of context, like finding expense reports, collecting receipts, adding memos. These are like easier tasks that you can unlock, as you've seen with customer support, automation, bot automation. A lot of that can be taken care of Gen AI relatively easily because it understands context. The second category is actually more fun. The second category is tasks which are impossible to do, but can now be done. They're still hard, but they can be done, and they're possible. And I think that's where the finance use cases on a non-deterministic model is what becomes very interesting. I'll give you one example here. At the end of the month, finance teams are required to close their books, and they have to reason over lots of different data, different transactions, GL codes, because if they get it wrong, they can get audited. They have to file taxes on this. So this has to be highly deterministic with very low error rate. And instead of saying, oh, we will build these fancy models and Gen AI will solve the closing the books. We did exactly the model that Tesla used for autopilot. The model is you will be in control. So first time you're doing self-driving, you keep your hands on the steering wheel. Then you can let this hands go after a while. And 30 seconds later, you're like, oh wow, okay, the car can drive for 30 seconds. I can trust it. 3 minutes, it can trust it. And now we're at a point where Waymo can actually drive me around San Francisco. And similar to that, what we did was we reasoned over lots and lots of billions of records of data to prompt the accountants and the finance teams on all the rules they can apply automatically to close their books based on the reasoning that we've done looking through hundreds and hundreds of millions of transactions. And first time you get 70% right, they're like, okay, I accept, accept, accept. Next time they're 90% right. And you get to a point where they're like, okay, I can trust it. Tell me what the 5 exceptions are. And we get to a point where they can gradually, it used to be impossible to consider the finance team will use AI to close books. We're getting to a point where they're like, it's possible, it's hard, it's possible, and they build trust. So the reason why, this sharing for these two models is AI being used for normal automation, that's going to be table stakes. In fact, people won't even think about AI. That's like, obviously, I should not be doing normal human tasks. How do you apply AI for things which are impossible to even consider is where a lot of value is being generated now. And I think that's the challenge for us, product people, is to go figure out what are those impossibly hard tasks that are now possible because you can reason over insane amount of large data very quickly.
And switching gears a little bit, talking about your team, I think you had a quote that said that if a PM is not spending 20 or 30% of their time using AI, they should be worried about their role.
I think there's definitely this meme going on that product management is dead. And if I look at it honestly, there is some truth to that statement, which is a lot of PMs, especially in the last 5-7 years of excessive hiring, a lot of people became PMs. And I mentioned earlier, and if the work became coordination of work, I'll follow up with engineers, I'll follow up with design, I'll go through customer gong call recordings. Most of those things are gone, Carlos. That's not the job. In fact, that should never have been a job, but you could not do it earlier, so somebody had to do it. And people quickly forgot that all those were inputs that the PMs had to process to actually come up with the strategy, come up with the value proposition, come up with what next move to make. That was product management. Everything else was cost of doing product management. When the cost of product management goes down to zero, only the real PMs will survive. And I know it sounds scary, especially, when I mentor younger, newer PMs, I'm like, do you know what it takes to really be a PM? And like, do you have an opinion? Do you have creativity? Can you think strategy? Can you think out of the box? Because everything else that you're not doing out of the box is going to get automated. So I'll give you an example. We had average day, 8 hours of a PM. Let's say they're spending 4 hours going through a lot of data, a lot of con calls and recordings and user feedback and user forums and user voice and 50 tools and we use Statsig. Now, most of those 4 to 5 hours can be compressed into 20 minutes. And guess what? You don't need as many PMs to go through that kind of task anymore. So what are you doing with the rest of time in coming up with either much higher velocity and much higher iterations on what you can do uniquely? I think that's really important to consider, which is if you're not already using AI to assist, to cut down those 4 hours of busy work and hard work into 20 minutes and using your remaining extra time to think creatively and to think strategically and solve like true next generation customer problems, you are probably going to get eliminated in that role change that's coming very, very rapidly for all of us. So yes, I know it sounds very doomsday, but actually not doomsday. That's how productivity kicks in, is when you use assistants from technology. And if people and PMs today are not living and breathing AI tools and cutting down their busy work by 90%, they are not spending the cycles on the right things.
I mean, and I think it's a way to be consistent with what you are selling to your customers, right? If you're selling them productivity and savings, then that should be a way to also implement that internally. In fact, I noticed that you had to right size your product team a few years ago. So I would love for you to tell me more about that experience and where you are today.
Yeah, I think we made that pretty difficult call in January this year, where we are half the size of the PM team where we used to be last November. And initially, people are like, "Oh my gosh, You have a large surface area. We have a global fintech product with expense management travel. They're like, you have such a 5 product lines. You serve everything from 2 people to 20,000 people. There's no way with half the PMs you can keep running and scaling the business. The reality is we've grown faster this year, shipped more products this year, and shipped more features with higher customer satisfaction than we did in the last 2 years. Why? For two reasons. One, I think leaner teams and efficient teams are generally move faster. But second, the amount of information velocity that kicks in with assistance from these tools, we did not compromise on that front, and we use heavily tools like Glean to summarize what's happening. Instead of reading 200 docs, Glean summarizes it. At the end of every Gong call, no one sitting through, going through Gong calls. Gong calls send us summaries on like, here are 5 things to go look at. Every single tool, we enabled AI to be far more productive to help us get to a point where all of the busy work that was overloading the PMs gets reduced into half. So half the PMs can not just do double the work, can actually do 3 times the work because they're now thinking on more creative, important problems. So I think Brex is a very living case study of how running leaner with the help of technology, especially AI, can fundamentally unlock value and scale.
So tell me more about how you're structuring your team, especially now that you also oversee go-to-market.
They're still clean functions. So I have product management as a function. I do have sales, pre-sales, marketing, and customer success as independent functions. I think one thing that changes with the fact that they all are part of my org is there's a very tight connection and a very fast feedback loop between the PM that's building to the seller or the product marketing person, which is building value proposition, and the seller. That feedback loop gets closed very clearly. But the organization is very clean. I have an amazing CRO responsible for revenue and all selling. He runs all of our sales and demand teams. Marketing, which runs all of value proposition, brand, campaigns, and we have the product management team, which comes up with the actual core product areas. The big difference, Carlos, from last year to this year is we used to have PMs assigned to features and technologies and customer segments, and all that is gone. Our PMs are like mini CEOs. I have 5 lines of business between cards, banking, bill payment, which is accounts payable, travel, and I have exactly 1 PM for each one of them, as opposed to having multiple PMs doing features. It doesn't matter. 1 PM, which looks at their product line as a business. They look at acquisition, retention, revenue, resurrections, churn, like a full CEO does for the business. They do it for the area. And a lot of people in the industry get very triggered when we use PM as a mini CEO analogy. But the reality is that's exactly what a PM is supposed to be doing, is looking at a holistic picture of what I'm building. Is it selling? Is it successful? What do I need to do to make sure I'm creating value and capturing value? And I think that's my expectation from a PM, is to be able to do that well. And you don't need a lot of PMs for it. A handful of very smart PMs can do that.
In fact, I heard you say that you get PMs involved in sales calls too, right?
Oh my gosh, my secrets are leaking. Yes. So now we have this, every time you're building a new product, one of the things which I, always irked me and frustrates me is the time it takes for a PM to then explain to the product marketing person who writes the sales enablement material to go train the salesperson to go sell a product. That just needs to die. So we have a rule, which is first 25 customers are sold by the PM itself. So building a new feature, the PM is the one who's actually on a sales call, explaining why what they build is actually much better than what customers have. So forcing the PMs to actually think about value proposition and pitching and positioning and pricing is a very good way to make sure that we're not building technology for the heck of building technology. We're building technology because it genuinely creates some value. And through those calls to selling customers, they also understand how to capture that value through monetization. So once they get 25 customers to say, yes, I can buy this, I can sell this. Luckily, I don't have to pay my PMs any sales compensation. So that's good. So they don't get any quota on that one. But they have to go sell, because then I have confidence that the sales team can do this at scale. So sales and marketing are scale functions. They should not be the testing functions. PMs are the ones who should be accountable for finding the right PMF and getting to a point where they feel confident that this can be repeated.
So how do you find or train PMs to develop that type of muscle? Because I agree with you, GTM is becoming more and more relevant within PMs, but it's also not the obvious background, right? Like a lot of us come from an engineering background.
That was probably the hardest transformation I've gone through with my PM team, and we had to do a lot of that at the beginning of this year. So, we come Brex is a deep fintech. We build, very, very, very complicated global financial services. And a lot of our previous PMs essentially used to work behind the scenes on risk and fraud and modeling and underwriting. And very quickly, we realized that if that's what they do, and they're not spending a ton of time with the customers and selling and figuring out what to build next, we will both be not using PMs correctly, but more importantly, that's not where value will get created. So what we did earlier this year, for almost 4 months, was we completely took away any responsibility that PMs had on coming up with the engineering backlog, designs, and interactions to our engineering and design leaders. And PMs were responsible exactly for one metric. You need to grow adoption of your product. The minute you change that, they're like, wait, I don't not control adoption because I'm not going to sell. I'm like, sounds good. Why don't you start selling? And just changing the top line metric, saying your job is adoption, not even revenue. Next will be revenue. Start with adoption, forces all alignment on what they need to prioritize and not prioritize. So it took us, 4-5 months of retooling the entire PM discipline to be heavily outcomes driven from revenue as a lagging indicator of adoption. But everyone was gold on adoption, and that very quickly started changing what they spend time on, who they talk to. They started spending a lot more time with the go-to-market peers as opposed to the engineering peers. Because now building the next feature is not what's sexy. What's sexy is to move the chart up and to the right.
Love that so much. But let's talk about go-to-market. Because now that you oversee both sales and product, so you might have a PLG motion or an SLG motion. So how do you go about combining those two in a productive way?
The holy grail of PLGs and SLGs. I think one of the hardest part of Brex's job at Brex is we are a very successful PLG company because we built the first corporate card for startups, and there were hundreds and thousands of startups that would sign up every month, every quarter, and that all had to be PLG. And 2 years ago, when we started building the enterprise business, we had to go build an entirely new SLG muscle as well. And now we're at a point where, like, wow, you can serve 2 people in a garage, a founder, and you can serve an enterprise, global enterprise with like 50,000 employees globally through sales. We serve everyone in between that spectrum. Very quickly, the idea of PLG and SLG breaks down. And what emerges is essentially a humans in the loop PLG motion, which not only accesses SLG, but also makes PLG a lot more human. And what this looks like is we actually don't have 2 motions, we have 3 motions. We have pure PLG, which is come to Brex.com, sign up for a credit card, sign up for a bank account, boom, you're good to go. And the product assists you with onboarding and activation. And then we obviously have this massive enterprise deployment, which is a sales rep is talking to you, people fly in, help you deploy the software and configure and roll it out. But bulk of our growth comes from what we called light human assisted PLG, which essentially is there is still a sales rep involved. The sales rep does 2 calls to the customer. Everything has to be done heavily by the product being as frictionless as possible. So from onboarding, KYC, underwriting, all of that is tech assisted and product assisted, as opposed to that being human processes. And that is the hybrid model that we finally got working at Brex as well. So we have a company with 3 models, PLG, SLG, and this light assisted PLG, still run by sales team, and sales carries the quotas for it. But it's fantastic to see we can go from 2 to 20,000 companies and everywhere in between with that increasing level of automation in the product to not just acquire, but also retain and cross-sell customers.
I can imagine when you started targeting founders of startups, there was an opportunity to become that first product that they needed for credit card or other financial needs. But as you move up market and start targeting large enterprises that has been around for a long time, they might have some solutions prior to you having that conversation. So for that type of product that it tends to be very sticky, even if it's not good, it's just so hard to change. How do you go about kind of penetrating that account and potentially expanding it?
I love that. I love that question so much because when most PMs at least think like, oh, all I have to do is build the feature, and if my feature is better than the competitor's feature, people will buy me. But as you described, the cost of using a product is not just your product. The cost of using a product is the cost of removing the old product, removing all the old material and muscle behavior, and then deploying your product. So you have to create n times more value to justify change management, cost of switching, retraining, and redeployment. And that is way harder than just building another feature. So, questions: how do you do it? There's obviously, you have to, especially in today's world, given how cost conscious every company is, they really have to see a 10x value in moving to a new solution. So one of the things we had when we were building Brex expense management was the market has 60-80% penetration with Concur and American Express. And the challenge for our teams, was, if your product is not literally 10 times better, why would I ever ask somebody to go rip out an entire Concur Dynamics deployment in place with Brex? So we started with a 10x better product experience as the North Star. So first goal was like, it has to genuinely be that much more valuable. The second part was, we need to take the customers on a journey of landing and expanding, so they're not paying all the change management costs upfront. And that's a trick most people forget, is to reduce the friction cost. You can actually start and use a land and expand as a core motion versus rip and replace. And that's a good way to reduce the friction required to try out your product. The third and the most fun part is, AI can disrupt you, but you can use AI to disrupt your competitors as well. So what we go into accounts, and normally what would take us 6 months to understand change management, we can use AI to automatically generate user onboarding material for that company. We can automatically use AI to reconfigure their connections to send data to us. We use AI to repackage what they have in terms of API connections. All of that can significantly get reduced thanks to amazingly LLM powered AI solutions now. So constantly be thinking, AI doesn't have to only be in your product. AI can actually be leveraged heavily into change management cost reduction as well. So all those three things, which is 10x better product, land and expand versus rip and replace, and then using AI to reduce change management cost, are three strategies which have worked exceptionally well for Brex to go win like very, very large enterprise companies. And in fact, this morning we were celebrating, we added our 175th public company running on Brex.
Boom.
Yes.
What a good time to have you on the podcast. You have so many hot takes. I need to bring this one up. You said product market fit is dead. Tell me more about it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. This is controversial, as it should be. The 101, like the 101 of product training, starts with, thou shalt find product market fit, and then you will scale. And great. Sounds like sounds almost like Bible. So let's listen. What does it really mean, right? The very definition of product market fit means you have built a product, or you've identified a problem which you can solve in a large enough market, which is hence a market, in a way where users are willing to pay a price for it. Very simple definition of PMF. And this logically makes sense. The only problem, Carlos, is there is no definition of market left anymore. The market changes every day, every week, every month, and it's a constantly evolving, rapidly changing cycle. So if you assume that I have a static market, you would assume you have a static product. When the market is changing, the buyers are changing, the buying criteria is changing, and imagine, this is pre-AI. With AI, the market changes way before we understand what's going on. The notion that you found PMF and then you can keep scaling, that's just bullshit. So sorry for very, very strong language about that, but I think which is the single biggest reason I see most companies fail is they assume they've achieved PMF and hence they start sleeping on the wheel. PMF is not a destination anymore. PMF is a journey, and you have to constantly keep evolving, because what you thought was PMF last week, last month, last quarter, no. There are 10 new competitors, 5 new ways to do the same thing. And with AI and the momentum of building products with AI, PMF is going to become a very, very rapidly shifting goal. So hence, Anyone who's still sitting on saying, oh, I have found PMF in this segment with this core audience, and now let's just keep scaling, they're in for a pretty rude shock. So if you do not wake up every day morning saying, very good chance my PMF for my product today is dead, and I need to go back to first principles to saying, hey, do I still have relevance? Am I still the best thing out there? Am I actually still solving the same need which existed, I thought, a month ago or 6 months ago or a year ago? And am I still charging the right price for it to justify why I should be charged? You will not have PMF for too much longer. So hence saying PMF is dead is a very blunt way of saying, if you don't wake up and understand that the market shifts way faster than your product shifts, you will always be out of PMF. So your job as a PM now is to make sure that in the equation of product market fit, product innovation is outpacing market's expectation. That is what the new world of PMF will look like.
So when you are building a multi-product organization, I can imagine there might be some business lines that are more mature that we can justify they have more traction than others, but you still have conviction in some new ones. So how do you go about protecting those initiatives or products that might still not move the needle on an absolute basis, but they are part of your future?
I love that. I love that because it's so easy to run out of patience when you have a big business and you have small incubation businesses, because every incremental dollar in a big business will generate big yields in the short term, and then it's very easy to move investment between an incubation versus like a fully established business. But I think that's exactly why companies die. You can call it classic innovator's dilemma, you can call it adjacencies playbook, whichever playbook you like. The investment portfolio has to think about 70-20-10, or you could do 60-30-10 depending on the company and the domain you're in. But effectively, if you're spending anything more than 60 to 70% on your core business and not earmarking 40% for where the business will come from a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, very good chance that you will be out innovated. So what we do is we have these incubation businesses. So 70% is core business, heavy investment in making sure that we continue to scale what we have today with constant innovation. 20% are obvious adjacencies. So the example I took was we had cards when we built banking, or we had cards and we built expense management. The core business was 70% was card, 20% came from expense management, but we also had 10% of moonshots. So while I was building expense management, and we knew the market will very quickly evolve to also have travel, expectation of the same products. One product that can do cards, expense management, travel, bill pay, and 10% of team, even though my 20% was already starving for resources, we kept 10% of the team ring fenced to travel because we knew that customers' expectations would change way faster than we can start building a new product line. And it made us go slower on the 20% investment versus 30, but it made sure that at the end of the year, we had all the three products working in unison really, really well. And the way we used to evaluate those teams, which is to your question, how do you protect those investments, is we're not looking to bring revenue from the new investments. All I'm looking for are signs that customers are finding value, they're retaining, they're using, and they would sign up, and there's adjacency. So you start looking at attach rates, early adoption, and churn as the indications of value versus revenue and users and stuff, because that's not proxy of value for an incubation business.
So what's your next moonshot after travel?
That's confidential because we're in a very competitive market, but safe to say that in the world and fintech world that we are in, three things are constant. One, customers will constantly keep expecting more and more global products versus fintech, as you know, Carlos, is very country specific. You have to do one country at a time. But most customers don't have the patience to wait for like 85 solutions in 85 countries. They want one global. So a lot of our innovation is happening in making sure everything works globally. Second, we talked a lot about AI. That will change fintech more dramatically than anything we've seen before, because finally we can reason over with high deterministic numbers over financial data, which was impossible to do in the past. And that will change how people use financial products. So you can expect a lot of announcements in that front. And then third, and always the most fun one, is continued innovation for the end user. Because my ultimate vision is every employee in every company can make the best spend decisions for their company because they have perfect information on how every decision ladders up to the company's value. So we have this campaign called Make Every Dollar Count. That's what Brex is trying to do. And a lot of the innovation that we do is to make sure every individual employee is empowered to make every dollar count in the company.
Well, thank you so much, Karan. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast and learn more about how you're thinking about building product.
Always fun catching up with you, Carlos. Thanks for doing this.